Good morning, Chairman Owens, Ranking Member Adams, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify at this hearing. The cost of college is simply too high for most families to afford. Tuition and fees for undergraduates this past year were almost $12,000 for an in-state public college student, $4,000 for a community college student, and more than $43,000 for a private nonprofit, and that's not even including room and board, books, and other expenses. For millions of students, the only option to afford an education is to take on mountains of debt. Total federal student loan debt stands at nearly $1.7 trillion, with the average federal student loan burden just under $40,000. Under the Trump administration's watch, an increasing number of borrowers have struggled to repay their loans, with an astounding 1 out of every 4 borrowers currently delinquent on their loan. Unfortunately, the prospect of higher education has become a catch-22 for families across the country. Making a safe, secure living too often requires education after high school, but getting that degree requires taking on enormous debt and financial risk that could leave them worse off. The Century Foundation's own research found that people without a college credential are living in a different, harsher economy. They're twice as likely as their college-educated counterparts to skip meals or medication due to cost, twice as likely to report being late on their bills, and far more likely to turn to debt to cover their expenses. Higher education was expensive before Donald Trump came into office, but actions taken by his administration and by Congress have made the situation far worse. First and foremost, in the last year, the Trump administration has driven up daily costs from utilities to healthcare to school supplies, so much so that Americans are forced to make impossible trade-offs between putting food on the table, keeping their lights on, and getting the medical care that they need and deserve. I know the president has called the issue of affordability a hoax, but for countless families across the country, this pain is real. Congress's decision to gut Medicaid and SNAP to pay for massive tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans only deepened that pain, as did its decision to stand by and watch health insurance costs skyrocket. Now, 3 in 10 Americans are delaying or skipping medical care due to cost. 1 in 3 people are skipping meals due to finances, and millions of Americans are behind on their utility bills. Nearly 40% of working-class people are relying on short-term debt like buy now, pay later to cover their bills. Second, H.R. 1 has created a huge vulnerability for public higher education that is already driving up tuition prices in many states. H.R. 1's cuts to Medicaid and SNAP put immense pressure on state budgets, and as states scramble to fill those gaps, we are already seeing them cut appropriations for public higher education, leading to tuition increases. Several states have slashed higher education funding or raised prices, and unfortunately, I expect we'll see more in the coming year. Third, Congress and the Trump administration have drastically increased the cost of student loans, both for current and future borrowers. H.R. 1 eliminated income-driven repayment plans, including the SAVE plan, replacing them with a skimpier single plan that puts borrowers at higher risk of default. That change alone will cost many borrowers between $2,800 and $4,800 per year. H.R. 1 also placed borrowing limits on certain federal loans, creating new and lucrative opportunities for the student loan industry. Major private lenders like Sallie Mae, Navient, and SoFi lobbied for these limits, and they're standing ready to extract profits from students. As SoFi told its investors, their company would be very happy to step in for the government and would absolutely capture that opportunity. Finally, the Trump administration has opened the door to predatory education programs and student loan servicers by taking the cops off the beat, sidelining the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and eliminating the units at federal student aid in charge of enforcement. While there are many actions that Congress can take to undo this damage, I urge you to focus on using the big levers that the federal government has to make real change, not incremental tinkering around the edges or clever programs that make good headlines in trade publications, but no difference in family budgets. We need change that families can actually feel, change that makes life more affordable for all Americans.